I'd like to welcome everybody today to our co-learning webinar on breaking the forgetting curve with our guest speaker today, Rich Arnold. I'll give you some more details about Rich as we get started. I did want to. We oftentimes give people a two-minute grace to come in. I am happy to say Rich already is in the 100-person registrant club, so. We had quite a few folks registered today, which tells us a lot about the interest in the topics. So let's take about 1 more minute, and then we'll go ahead and get started. As people continue to roll in here. And as you can see down, the chat should be in the bottom of your screen. And for everyone who wants to go ahead and look in there and offer comments to Rich or to each other, for that matter, we are going to heavily encourage today that you offer up concerns, questions in the chat as Rich is going. He prefers to field these comments as we go. And from my standpoint, that's easier for me because I usually forget what I'm going to say at the end anyway. Okay, I have 11:02, and in the interest of respect of your time, I'm going to go ahead and do the intro for Rich, and then I'm going to let him fly. Rich Arnold is a human performance technologist with 40 years of experience. Leading operations-focused teams, organizations, and training units across the military, law enforcement, government, commercial, NGOs, UN, and international sectors. Quite impressive. 24 years in the Coast Guard and the Navy. Thank you for your service, sir. With experience ranging from program management to chief learning officer across small to large corporations. Former adjunct faculty and Darden fellow for ODU here in Virginia. Past president of the Federal Government Distance Learning Association and past president of the military chapter of the International Society for Performance Improvement. I got to say, I'm often intimidated by people with these pedigree bios, but I had the chance of talking with Rich yesterday and preparing for this. And I got to say, this is one practical, down-to-earth guy. And especially, I was elated that this is going to be an evidence-based presentation, but yet it's not going to be an academic one. So with that, I look forward to this presentation, and I will throw the baton over to you, Rich.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, Bob. Hopefully everybody can hear and see me okay. Although I have a face made for radio, I'll do my best to use some nonverbals to get the point across. So we're going to talk a little bit today about breaking the forgetting curve, or basically how can you make your training more effective? How can you, for what you're doing, not just for your organization, but for you. So I'd like to pose a question to you to think about this. How does your training contribute to high reliability? When you think about reliable operations, accident prevention, performance, getting the most from your organization to meet your metrics, how does your training contribute to that? If you're thinking about that, does it do it perfectly already? Probably wouldn't be here. Is there anything you can do to improve its performance? That's what we're really going to focus on today. And it's not magic fairy dust or unicorn horn put into everybody's beverage. It's basically a practical approach that's been around for quite a while, but one that we typically don't use because it's been too hard. But we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So, whoops, my mouse is apparently has a life of its own. There we go. So if we think about training, what it costs, actually considering that workplace training, over $100 billion in 2023. And I think it's pretty safe to say as you move up in size, you'll see the dollar amounts per person tend to go up as well. But we spend a lot of money on training. How about, I know everybody has their chat on. How about a yes or a one in chat if you agree with me that we spend a lot of money on training? A 2 would be a maybe, and a 3 is no, Rich, I disagree with you. Oh my God, he must be a college professor. He's asking us questions. So getting a lot of yeses, getting some maybes, depends on where. So I'm seeing a lot of ones and twos, which means, yeah, we're spending a fair amount of money. Maybe not as much as some of the numbers here, but we spend a fair amount of money. So I'm going to ask you another question. And no, it's not the Dale Carnegie method, and I'm not a salesman. But, do you want your training to be more effective? A yes or a one in chat means yes. A two is like, well, I'm pretty comfortable with it. And the three is like, no, man, I got bored. I showed up here. I don't need to make it better. All right. Well, I'm seeing fair amounts of yeses, including some emphatic ones. So let's talk a look about how we might be able to do that. Okay. So what is training good at? If we think about training and where we're at, let's don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. What is it good at? Initial comprehension, initial knowledge and skill development. Unfortunately, though, most training, we tend to design, and I say we because thank you for the warm introduction, Bob, but I've been in the training and education business since my hairline was about here. So, when we think about this, we tend to deliver training to make it efficient. And it's also effective initially. Thanks, Amy. I'm glad you like the joke. Anyway, I'll three shows, I'll be here all day. Try the veal. Okay, so as we go along and we think about training, short-term memory tends to be the repository for a lot of what we do. It's efficient because if we're moving people, logistics, whatever, it's almost that Frederick Taylor time motion efficiency. Let's get them all in the classroom. Let's get it delivered. Then let's get them back on the job. But think about, how do you learn? How do you learn best when you remember something? Is it crammed into one session or spaced out over time? Put that in chat for me if you don't mind. Oh my God, this guy's asking us questions. This is not the kind of he's going to make me do stuff in the webinar. Do you rather get everything crammed at once, or would you rather have it spaced out over time? Learn a little, do a little, learn a little, do a little. What do you all think? Colin, spaced out over time? Maria, sorry, I hope I got that right. Marie, spaced out. Spaced out. Sonia, spaced out. Edwin, teach someone else soon. Good point, Edwin. If I'm going to use it right away, getting it done effectively and efficiently all at one time, that's pretty good if you're going to roll right out and use it. I remember being the honor graduate of a really complex course. It was a Navy, basically how to be a tactical action officer, fight the ship, shoot missiles, launch stuff, and I was the honor grad. The problem was I had to memorize everything and I didn't use it for 6 months. By the time I got time to use it, I'd forgotten 90% of it because it was crammed. And that's typically what we see. Yeah, business only wants to pay for one and be done. I think that's a great point, Brad. And that's what we're going to talk about. That's something you can use today. And Amy, best way to learn something, as we all know, is to teach it. So I love that. That's another good point. Okay, so the key, though, is most of our paradigm, and I don't want to overgeneralize to all of you, but what I see in over my career, we tend to compress things to make them efficient to deliver, which really puts a lot of pressure on short-term memory. But short-term memory, we tend to dump from a human brain standpoint. So one-off training, also, we think about high reliability. High reliability is about habits. I learned it in class. Do I have the habit formation when I go on the job? So the problem is this erosion and lack of new habit formation causes a deterioration of knowledge and skills. And there's a ton of research on this. By the way, if you hear me spouting, there's research on this. This is a proven thing. And you're like, I don't believe you unless I see it. You are welcome to contact me. My email will be at the end and I'll be happy to send you I'm doing a paper in December at a big training and simulation conference, and it's got the research citations in it. In other words, I'm happy to discuss it with you offline if you want. Okay, so let's think a little bit about this forgetting curve that I'm talking about. Now, this is a proven, it's based on some seminal research done by a guy named Dr. Ebbinghaus. And if you've heard of him, you get extra credit points right off the bat in chat. But Herman Ebbinghaus looked at this forgetting curve. And I think we all know, probably all heard the expression, use it or lose it. Let me ask you a question. How many of you could pass all of your college exams if you took them again right now? Anybody? Give me a yes or a one in chat if you go, yeah, I could pass them all right now. Amy's like 0 chance. Forget your 1, 2, 3 thing, man. No way. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of no ways, no chances. Snowball in that place. Amen to that. So the problem is if we don't use something, we lose it. And we all kind of know that. But what I don't think a lot of people really grasp is how fast we lose it. Typically, as you walk out of a lecture, you're probably right about here. In other words, as you leave today's webinar, you will have forgotten about 20% of what I'm saying right now without additional reinforcement. Now, if you do a review right afterwards, if you were to review the presentation, your notes, within about 6 hours of leaving, you can bump that up to about 90, upwards of 90, north of 90% as an immediate refresher. But I'd like to draw your attention to this curve. This is basically the forgetting curve. When you train somebody on something new, if it's difficult, it's infrequent. In other words, they're not rolling right out of the class and using it. This is where you end up after about a month, about 20 to 25% retention. So this forgetting curve operates for pretty much everything we're doing in training, performance support, training and education. So what we want to do is break this curve. That's the name of the presentation today. We want to break this curve. First off, let me ask this question. Does this resonate with you, this forgetting curve that I'm talking about? How about a yes or a 1 in chat? 2, maybe 3 is, I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid, Rich. I don't know what you're talking about. Seeing some 1s. Yep, okay. So it looks like resoundingly resonate. Thank you, Edwin. Yeah, I mean, and by the way, there are literally thousands of studies about this. I know because I've looked at studies of studies, other studies. I've done some testing that I'm going to show you in a few minutes. So this is something and basically though, all of us in this room probably just accept it. Hey man, okay, look, all right, Rich, there's a forgetting curve. You know, that's the way the world works. All of us, K through 12, undergraduate, graduate degrees, corporate training, we all live with this. So what do we do about it? Well, we have mobile training teams, refresher training, job aids, checklists, and these are all good things. But there is a methodology that we can use to actually break this. Okay, assuming I can get my mouse to work, there we are. So what we really want to do is look at developing long-term memory versus simple short-term memory, the cram it in and data dump. That's going to require some additional things like repetition, application within the job, and reinforcement. Hopefully you're already dealing with application within the job because you're not teaching people stuff they don't use. But what about oftentimes things like critical procedures? It's difficult and it's infrequent. It's not happening every day. You learn how to change the tire of your car. You're probably not changing it every day. It's, you know, once every, I don't know, once you own the car. Turning it on, you know, using your blinkers, that's daily stuff, doesn't require any reinforcement. But for things that are difficult or infrequent, we want to think about doing some of these reinforcement and repetition things. This is iterative if we want to do this on a long-term basis. Now, that said, it's like, okay, thank you, Dr. Obvious, but how do we do this in a way that's cost effective? Because people are working. I can't be yanking them off the job all the time. Correct. So here's our big pal, Dr. Herming Ebbinghaus. You know, this is where this method comes from, but we're going to talk about this spaced repetition effect. So spaced repetition, when we add practice in, retrieval practice, or basically a challenge event, a question event. If you think about when we add these things in after our program, we can increase by about a factor of 3 that which is retained. And that's tested. So if you only remember 20 or 30%, you're bouncing that up to like 80+%. That's pretty cool. The key though is it's got to be a challenge event or a question type thing. You know, in other words, I'm not just presenting the information at you, I'm asking about it. It's got to be tied to your initial training. It's got to start right after you finish the training. And you need multiple events that are going to be spread out over time. So this spacing is also key. Yeah, by the way, Bob put this in chat. I want to tell you all, I am not one of those people. Thank you, Bob. Do not hold your questions to the end. If you've got a question or a comment, pop it out there. You can either key a mic and use it or put it in the chat. I don't want you to have to wait to the end because we may all forget what we were talking about. So feel free if you have a question or you're not, whatever. I'm more than happy if you ask. And by the way, if you think of your question after the session, you'll get my email at the end and phone number. You're welcome to contact me. Okay, so here's the thing. If we do spacing over a period of time, and it goes back to exactly almost all of you said, yeah, I tend to remember stuff better if you space it out. So if we do short spacings, that's going to help, but longer spacings are going to really help retain information. That's really the key. So it's going to be repetition and it's going to be spacing. We increase this over time. Hold on, I'm in the chat tool. There we go. So let's talk a little bit about this forgetting curve and what the impact is with spacing. So here we have the basic forgetting curve that I showed you those plot points before. And again, the research tells us most people will finish a program right about 80% when they're done. Now, as I add, and this shows a 4-event challenge event. If I add those right afterwards, I'm going to bounce the retention up and then the curve begins again. Then I'm going to go ahead and do another one and we're going to bounce this up. And as we go along, we're going to basically boost the retention. And that's the magic. That's really the outcome we want. That's the magic goal. Increase that retention so people, whatever it is you're training has got to be important or you wouldn't have pulled them off the job to do it. So we want to boost that retention. And what we're going to see is with spaced repetition events, we're going to really boost it. But here's the best part that you're going to, I think, be happy about. This is not reteaching the course. This is not, well, yeah, of course you're going to remember, Rich, you're teaching the course 4 more times. Nope. I'm talking like a 5-minute, literally just a few minute challenge event that pops in. And you'll notice the spacing, day 1, right afterwards. Then we're going about a week. Then we're going about a little over 2 weeks. Then we're going out to about, a week. Then we're going out to a little over 2 weeks. And that gets us to the last one, which is about a month after the end. These are 5-minute events, maybe 8 minutes, depending on what you do. It's a rounding error on the course. And you're reusing the key objectives and content from the source course when you build your challenge events. How about a yes or a 1 in chat if this makes sense to you? 2, maybe 3 disagree. Hey, we're going to reuse our content. They're going to be short challenges and they're going to be spread over about a month-ish time with intervals increasing. Now you could do this from your computer and run little mini webinars like I'm doing if you want to get everybody together. But I actually tested this using an off-the-shelf system because I'm lazy and I want to be able to do this. Amy, great question. Hey, everybody take a scan on Amy's question. Hey, you're only covering some of the topic. How does that help? Think about this, Amy. That item, you're picking content from key objectives, but it's a great question because what the brain tends to do is when you reinforce one of those events, it drags other stuff along with it. Think about maybe something triggers one of your memories. And because you associate that content together, it will often bring other things along. So it's not perfect, it's not going to be 100%, but you're going to significantly increase the retention. If I can go from down here up to here, that's going to be a good thing. So that's a great question, Amy. But reinforce one item and it tends to drag other items with it. So these events, as we go through, we're going to basically query, we're going to give challenge events for different pieces of the content as we go through, and that's going to drag the whole thing forward. But here's one of the key things, folks. You can't start this 2 weeks later. It's got to start right afterwards. That's why you see that first review is right afterwards. Why believe me? Here's some tests that I personally helped organize, which I say the personal part, not for credit, but to tell you this is the truth. These are not pulled from other studies. I have other studies that show the same thing, but these are 3 tests done this year. 2 are for a U.S. Department of Agriculture instructor development course. I wrote the course. I'm the primary instructor. 1 was for in-person instructor. The other one was for virtual instructor. The other, so that's 2 courses on that first row. Second one is for Tidewater Community College. They help train Norfolk Naval Shipyard apprentices. I thought for given today, you would find this one interesting because they're learning real stuff to work in places like that and actual shipyards and whatnot. So take a look at some of these numbers, though. I think this is key because it really supports the research. Now, the pre-test is not a test before the class. You've done your course, and as you finish, I'm giving you a test before you start the reinforcement campaign. And we get exactly what we would expect. Hey, they all passed their program, but we're seeing about from a 76 to an 81, which is right up in this zone. We pass a course, but we immediately begin to forget things. Now they've gone through the campaign, the 4 events, the 4 reviews that I talked about here with this spacing. Now look at the post-test. This is why it feels like magic fairy dust. They went from 81 and 76 to 94 and 91, 76 to 87. Now, if I told you, think about this, those of you involved in corporate training, developing training, delivering training, being responsible for training, needing training for your people, through 4 challenge events of about 5 minutes each, I just boosted retention from 76 initially to 87. But I want you to think about something else. If I actually looked at this, hold on, let me get back here. If I wouldn't have done this, what if retention was down in this zone? I prevented the erosion of the forgetting curve. And not only did I prevent the erosion, it actually increased retention over where they finished as they completed the course. Honestly, it's almost like the numbers are too good. You probably feel like I cooked the books, but this is how this method works. That's why I'm excited about talking about it to you. How about a yes or a 1 in chat if this makes sense? 2 maybe, and if you're like 3, I think you're full of crap, Rich. Feel free to key a mic and tell me what I did wrong. What do you think? Seeing a fair amount of 1s? By the way, I use this method because if I was looking around the room, I'd be looking for like people doing the nonverbals like Bob does for me and like nodding like, yeah, I got that part, or like, what? You know, kind of a thing. So this is the methodology. This is the power of spaced repetition and reinforcement. It is not reteaching the course. It is pulling course content. If you've already paid somebody to develop your course, subject matter expert, instructional systems designer, there's some great ones in the room today that I know. You know, that's fine, but yeah, it also proved absolutely, Lyle. You know, but what it also does for us though is we're not spending a lot of money. I've served as a senior vice president, chief learning officer, program manager. Nobody wants to give me money for training, but by using this, I can reuse what I've already got to deliver it. Yes, absolutely. Great question. Great question. Does this apply only to training that's initially done live or applied to asynchronous? You can apply it to anything. The key point I want you to get, you've completed the course, whether it's in person, virtual live, self-paced. Right after you complete it, you're going to this first review, and then you're beginning the review process. But I don't want you to get all excited about this and not tell you how to do it. So we'll get to that in a second. So here's something else to consider. I'm just presenting the information a little bit different way. This shows your pre and post test. Remember, the pre-test it's not pre before training occurs. It's exiting the source training. Exiting the source training. And by the way, if you'd like a copy of this presentation, the sponsors have it, or again, you can email it to me and I'll be happy to send it to you. Yeah, there you go, Edwin. If you want, Edwin, sign up and I'll send you a 5-minute refresher and we'll see if we can boost you from 80% to 100 or pretty close to, you know. Great question. So here's the thing, voluntary. This is one of those, absolutely, Lyle. This is one of those things that I want you to consider. First off, we have to get people to do it. So in the testing I showed you, we had about 83 to 86% of the participants who said, yes, I will do this, who actually completed, which means about 10 to 17 said, nah, thanks, I'm done with my course, I don't want to do it. So there is a cultural component to success in this. Think about this. You finished a course. Yay, I passed. But now they're sending me reminders. So there's some strategies that we have to apply to this, such as you're not really done with your course until you complete your campaign, even though you spent most of the money and they can go back to wherever it is. But this no erosion. This is the key part I want you to pick up. If you remember nothing else in your 80% today, prevent erosion, break that forgetting curve, and not only prevent the erosion, increase the retention. The science in the workplace I found interesting. Here's something else, and this is a kind of an anecdotal data point that I really liked. 5 of the 21 students who took it were at or below passing after training. They were either right on the margin or they actually had technically failed the class. After the campaign, all were above passing, including this 5. That's pretty cool. We spent money to send somebody to training, and before I X them out of the program, they have to do it again, or they don't get the job code or whatever. We're able to fix it without doing refresher training. That's pretty cool, I think. Then again, I'm a training geek, so I get excited about stuff like that. All right. So here's the thing, though. Can you do this in a practical way? Okay, if you're going, hey, Rich, I'm kind of digging this idea, but how do I do this in a practical way? Because I am lazy, I used a commercially available, ready-to-go system. I'm not a salesperson. I'm not doing that today, but I think it's important that if you find something that can do. So I'm looking at a unified approach. And what I wanted was something that we could do spaced repetition, the way I've talked about, and also micro-learning. And you can read faster than I can talk, so you can see some of the things that we can get with this. Now, when we think about these challenge events, I don't just want text. Maybe it's a video, how to set up the valve, what's dangerous in this situation, find the 3 safety errors, whatever it might be. I can use infographics, I can use short videos, I can use PDFs, all the architectural elements you have in your training program, I can pull out and reuse in my challenge events. And I want to consider doing that. Leverage that stuff. Keep it short, keep it focused on your core objectives. I also want to be able to push it out. I don't want to bring somebody back to a training room. I can deliver it on a mobile phone. I can put it on their phone. I can put it on a tablet. I can send it to a desktop. It's accessible via the web. I want to be able to push this out and have it as least intrusive as possible over these events. How about one more time? Give me a yes or a 1 in chat if that makes sense to you. 2 maybe, 3 disagree. Is this, when I'm talking about a systematic approach to this? Because what you don't want to do is have to sit there at your desk and write all this down on paper and figure out how to push the PowerPoints out or something. Okay. And a big shout out to my friend Alex Salas, who's in the house, who's a darn good instructional systems guy. I'm glad you're here, Alex. Okay. So let's talk about this system that we're suggesting here. And here's a practical example. If you want to think about the approach to this, it kind of breaks it down and it does it within the framework of the system. The one I'm talking about is called Herman. Yes, if you remember Dr. Herman Ebbinghaus, that's who it's named out of. But what we want to think about is I want to push it direct to the person, make it easy. It can run through Teams. If you're using Teams, you can push it out through your LCMS. You can go direct. I don't want to bury too much into the technical weeds, but you do that. This is absolutely critical. You're not really, if you're doing spaced repetition and reinforcement, I'm not really pushing out new content. I'm reinforcing what I already did in the training program. I assumed your instructional systems design, you put the most important stuff in your training program. This is what we want to reinforce. So we want to bring people in. We're going to welcome them in. We're going to give them, hey, you got 4 questions today. Now, I know it's a bit of an eye chart. I'm not asking you to try to read this area up here. But this is basically a screen capture pulled directly from the instructor development course. I mentioned that was 2 of the tests. And then I'm going to ask a simple challenge event. They're going to grade it, or they're going to submit it. The system is going to then say, yep, that's correct. What else can you do? You'll get feedback, you get remediation. I can pop I can pop whatever I want to remediate or give them feedback on this element. After you go along, you can also use leaderboards. A lot of folks like competition, but you get your results and you move on. That simple. But it's structured in a way for rapid, easy development and rapid, easy delivery. I am not a guy who loves to learn new software because I'm old and tired. They showed me how to develop the campaigns. The professor, the associate professor at Tidewater Community College, he wrote his own campaign, showed him how to do it, worked like a Swiss watch. And then you integrate these results as you go along. So AI questions for the now again, I apologize. It's a little hard to read, but I wanted to kind of give you something. What I really liked is the tool also includes you can do a closed instance. I brought this out as a feature because I thought it might be germane to this audience. Think about your policies, your processes, your safety guides, your checklists, all the stuff that tells somebody how to do their job that you're training them about. You can put into a closed instance AI. In other words, the AI isn't going out forever across planet Earth. You're just having it shop within those things. So you can reinforce what's in your manuals, your guides, your processes, those kind of things. So I asked a question, of the AI, what are the benefits of spaced repetition and reinforcement? I thought that would be germane for today. So it's going into the closed instance, finding the data about that, and then I can then generate correct and incorrect answers, your correct answer and your distractors that are based on that information, which makes it really rapid and effective to generate high quality challenge events for my spaced repetition and reinforcement. One more time, how about a yes or a one in chat, or a two, maybe three? Yeah, I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid on this system approach to doing the spaced repetition and reinforcement we talked about in the first part of the presentation. And by the way, I'm not trying to make you say yes. I'm getting a sense of what you think about this because I can't look around the room. Okay, seeing ones, looks like everybody's kind of agreeing, or you didn't respond because you don't want me to call you out, which is fair. But if you think about this, I've run training organizations I've helped support global enterprise training. I'm not saying this to brag. I'm just saying I look for solutions that I can roll out. I'm not talking about maybe, I have 5 employees. I'm talking about I want to be able to roll this out on a big area and do it effectively and efficiently. How essential are the timings? Great question, Amy. It's not, the key is that the spacing intervals increase a little bit. But if they, it's not like, well, you went one day extra, so it all went, off the cliff. Not at all. In fact, there are times that we would take a challenge event and add another day to it because some people were too busy at their jobs. So you've got a lot of flexibility within that element. That's a great question. So you want to do the increasing spacing, but, and by the way, there's some great studies that look at absolute like algorithms to calculate this perfectly. I'm just the poor dumb ship driver. So what I like to do is, as long as the spacing is kind of increasing along that paradigm I showed you, you should be good to go. And that's what the testing has been telling us. So great question, Amy. Whoops, hold on. There we go. So and this is, Amy's my perfect lead-in person for this. So the key is you want to start immediately and the spacing increases. This is showing you kind of some simple when the sets occurred for one of our tests. And what you see, yeah, there you go, Amy. Perfect. I'll offer you a co-author credit as we go along. So we had the first one occurs right after training completes. We go about 5 days, then we go 8 days, then we go 12 days, and that completed. And we left the event open for a couple days. That way people, depending on their job, what's going on, they have time to do that 5 minutes or so. Send them a system reminder. Hey, you've got a challenge event, that kind of thing. Now, Alex said, should the spacing be set to proximity to application opportunities? That's a great question, Alex. I haven't tested that. Now, obviously, the more you're applying something, the less you need reinforcement and repetition. I would tell you this, if you're rolling out a training and right away, I mean, like right away, you're using everything you learned in training, then this process is less critical because you're going to get a lot of the reinforcement and repetition from the actual on the job stuff. I would suggest you focus in on those objectives, which you're probably not doing immediately, but you want to make sure they retain before they do it later on. I think we often provide, safety, response, emergency response, anything that might be difficult or critical that it be done perfectly, but it may not happen every day. That's the best content for this kind of thing, in my opinion. So, Atif said, what about post 4 weeks? Would reinforcement be less frequent or not needed at all? Well, I mean, if you don't use it for 5 years, that's another great question. You're probably going to need it at some point. But the beauty of the campaign is, let's say 6 months later, maybe that's my next study. You and I can do that, Atif, where I hope I pronounced the name correctly, sir. But maybe 6 months later, we can retest everybody and then do another reinforcement campaign. The beauty of repetition and reinforcement is it tends to dredge up not just the item you're talking about, but it brings other things. So that's a great question. I think when you looked at it, I would probably, if I were managing the skill sets you're talking about, a little bit of performance testing, a little bit of a knowledge check, see how people are doing, and then tag in a reinforcement campaign, which you could probably just reuse from the original course. Did I answer your question, sir? Sounds like a plan. Okay, excellent. So, moving on. We're about 35 minutes. We've been doing questions as we go along, but here's the thing. I'm going to challenge you all. You don't have to accept use it or lose it. I wish I'd had this system. I ran the Coast Guard's second largest training operation, about 13 different schools. And my school chiefs were super proud. When we graduated people, they were competent graduates, ready to go out there and protect truth, justice, and the American way, going out to the ships, the air stations, the small boat stations, etc. But we just expected, hey, if you're not using something right away, you're probably going to forget it. This methodology breaks that. Corporate training, when I was an executive at Lockheed Martin, when I was an executive at Unitech, we could basically, hey, there we go, Semper Paratus. Amy, you're killing it today. That's always prepared, by the way. So we don't have to accept it. I wish I would have had this. Now, the sad thing is the method's been around since the 1800s. But what I think the key, though, is there wasn't a real super practical way to do it. If I'm going to have to do a custom spaced repetition campaign, doing PowerPoints, hiring an instructor, doing those things, getting everybody together for the 5-minute challenge, that's probably not going to survive contact with regular work. What I loved about this system that I use for my tests, I'm able to put it right into the workflow. And that's the secret sauce. Putting it together, reusing content, and putting it right in. That systematic approach is a great way to do it. Now, there will be some cultural elements you got to work on. Hey, I'm done with training. Why do I have to do this? So, for example, we're looking at another test soon where I'm using this. And one of the key things we've suggested to the client was, hey, you know what? You get your course certificate for completion after your 4 challenge events. Congratulations, you finished the course. You're going to get 4 5-minute refreshers. When you're done with those, you get your certificate. So because we all have a cultural paradigm. When I'm done with training, I'm done. You don't finish a college course and then get one of your instructors to call you up 4 weeks later saying, hey, I got an assignment for you. It's not in the wheelhouse. So that's something we have to consider to do this method. Oh yeah, Edwin, Scouting America. Yeah, exactly. And by the way, if you think about it, think about when you go to the job, whether I'm learning how to tie a bowline, whether I'm learning how to do CPR, whether I'm learning how to drive a ship in a storm, whatever, I went to a school, but then on the job, I'm getting a lot of reinforcement on that. This gets back to Alex's question about, doing this kind of proximate to the reinforcement on the job. If I'm getting a lot of quality job reinforcement, which is how most of us really learn a little, do a little, learn a little, do a little. I'm basically boiling that process into these events, especially for those knowledge and skill elements that are difficult, infrequent, and yet they're critical they be done right. I was the incident commander for a 660-foot oil tanker fire. I still thank the good Lord that I had gone through major incident command training about 3 weeks before the tanker blew its guts out, or I would have not done the proper job. If I'd have had that course 9 months before, a year and a half before, things would have ended a lot more poorly. So being able to reinforce that, this kind of system is a great way to ensure that performance will be what it wants to be. You know, we all get tired of investigating accidents afterwards and looking at what could have been done to confirm, to prevent this. Kyle, I love what you're talking about. If you look at what Kyle put in chat, thank you, Kyle, for back. And I did not set this up with either Kyle or Amy today. A tutor taught him how to version of this. 65% average kid in high school used a version of this program in college and made it to 95. That's awesome, Kyle. By the way, I used to teach geometry to kids who failed geometry, and I used a method I didn't know what it was, but I kind of used a method like this. We also built rockets and blew stuff up because that made it more fun, but Okay. So again, Atif, what about post 4 weeks? Yes, I think you could do this. Colin noted to your question, Atif, it's going to flatten the forgetting curve. You can always do this again later on, but I haven't tested that myself, so I'm not telling you unequivocally. But logically, if you were to do additional spaced repetition and reinforcement campaigns post initial month, I can't imagine they would not work. And there's some research that supports that. Okay. Hold on. There we go. There's my contact information. Because I've made you all suffer through an hour webinar, you are more than welcome to contact me today, tomorrow, next week, next year. As long as I'm not doing the Darden app, I'll be happy to help you with whatever question you have. You can reach me at thepmglearning.com. I use that because that's the email I have for testing when I'm using the system, which makes sense because that way I can connect you to that if you're interested. You've also got my phone number. You're welcome. I would suggest you text me first because none of us pick up an unknown call nowadays. But if you text me first, then I'll pick it up when you call. So law enforcement training, Pappy, that's exactly right. By the way, I used to be a maritime law enforcement instructor for years. I taught unarmed defense tactics. When I first took over the program, they were teaching about 40 skills. I went back and tested all the units 2 months after they did the stuff and they'd forgotten everything. So I reduced the skill set from about 40 or 50 down to about 15. And then they were able to end up remembering it later on. We put in mandatory reinforcement after initial training. Again, what I really like about this, folks, and I know I've said it a bunch of times, but let me do it one more time. Having a method to have a consistent, I don't think I have to tell you all, a consistent, reliable methodology to develop and deliver the spaced repetition and reinforcement is critical to getting the systematic benefits from it for your training and performance programs. That's the key. I think you're all smart people. I know you could all put this together and just do it on your own, but having it systematic, having it reliable, being able to put it in the workflow, doing it, all those things. That's why I included the piece about a system that works. Otherwise, it's like, yeah, that's great, but it's too hard. Anyway, I hope, let me just check, make sure I haven't missed anything in chat. Yeah, there you go. Thanks, Alex. Yeah. Oh, by the way, Alex, nerd out to your maximum extent, man. Like I said, Alex is just supporting the other thing I told you about. This is not new. This has been around not only the 20th century, it's back to the 19th. So this has been around for a long time, but we just don't consider it. I think when I say us, I'm talking about my fellow performance technologists, instructional systems designers, etc. It's too hard, and it's too hard to bring everybody back for training after initial training. So we tend to do things like mobile training teams, refresher training, go to training if you screwed up, whatever. But I want a way to prevent. I like problem prevention. I was in the search and rescue business a lot of years. I would much rather not have to rescue you. I would much rather prevent the problem versus investigate it and fix it. At the conference earlier this year, I sat in on Bob's thing about MRIs, and I'm scared to go to the hospital now. But but the point is, let's prevent problems, and I like this methodology to do that, to make your system more reliable by breaking the forgetting curve. Absolutely. So Lauren, I'm glad you enjoyed it. Pappy, look forward to talking to you. At this point, we've got I think about 14 minutes, but I'll hang around for questions. Over to you, Bob.
Thank you, Rich. It's very thought provoking, and you really should be less of an introvert because you do make it engaging, and you do a fantastic job of monitoring chat. You make my job a hell of a lot easier. Thank you. I've got a couple of questions, if I may. When you talk about preventing learning erosion, is that like the conversion from the conscious to the subconscious? Because that's where we want. Are these spacings meant to keep that in our subconscious so that we don't forget them?
Well, I think that's part of it, Bob. That's a great question. It's a very deep question. I think that's part of it. Certainly, when you think about conscious versus unconscious retrieval, the fact that we want to make retrieval easy. Now, by the way, what I didn't do, because didn't really have enough time, is if I was at your company and I'm looking at my instructional systems design process for what are we going to train and how are we going to train it? The W's. What are we going to train? When are we going to train it? Why are we training? Who are we training? Those kind of things. I would put this into the mix initially to go, hey, if we're going to train, this is critical training, but let's begin with the end in mind. What type of content, my job aids are perfect. It's not difficult. This task is frequently performed, and I have great job aids on how to do it. And if they make a little mistake, it's not critical. So we do some initial training and then they're ready to go. I probably wouldn't do reinforcement and repetition on this because they're already going to get that. Now, if I said, look, it could be operating a piece of equipment, anything that is not going to be it's not going to be formed into a habit initially. It's difficult, it's infrequent, it's critically important, and it requires new habit formation that's probably not going to occur on the job. Man, I'd be thinking about this as a way to boost that, kind of a thing. And it's again, moving that information. There's some great stuff in chat that's going along. As Tracy Nicholson noted, it's about moving that information from short-term to long-term memory. Folks, our paradigm is, whether we think about it or not, we tend to rely on short-term memory. How much of us passed a test and then forgot it the next month? We tend to, our efficient, effective training system is deeply reliant on short-term memory. Now, we try to make it less reliant with job aids and checklists, but, putting something in the long term, like Tracy Nicholson noted, that's key. Now,
how many people have a Post-it next to their computer right now?
I'm festooned with those. So by the way, here's an example. You're walking down, you're going to go get on an airliner, and you're in seat 16B. How many times do you look at your boarding pass on the way down there? It's not rocket science. It's 16B. You comprehended it, but you keep checking because it's in short-term memory and it just data dumps. I won't ask for a yes or a one if you've done that. I don't want to call you out. I do it all the time. You can decide if you do it. So now, Amy, your comment there, the power of habit. I think that's absolutely a critical element, is the power, developing habits. High reliability is all about forming habits so that best practice becomes recurrent. So whatever I can do to reinforce the development of that habit formation, that's a whole other probably series of classes. But what I like about this method is I can tie that into that habit formation. Think about the challenge events. You could do a challenge event about a process or procedure, like, are you doing this each day? If not, how come? What are the potential things if you're not doing it? And then provide a little reinforcement. Again, this can tie nicely into your training program, and the world's your oyster as far as developing challenge events and what they might look at. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of just simple multiple choice stuff to reinforce. I love it when I can use a video, a clip, a case, an incident, or whatever as part of the reinforcement from the event. And Amy was Amy was happy to throw herself on the spike along with me about checking the boarding pass 12 times. Thank you, Amy, for backing it up.
That's like playing blackjack and reading your whole cards too. I can't
Yeah,
remember my
yeah,
whole
okay. It hasn't changed in the last 30 seconds, but let me look again. Sure.
Can I ask one more question, Rich?
You can ask anything you want, Bob, as long as you don't put me in an MRI.
Okay. Uh, Understanding that this increases retention, is there any evidence or studies to correlate the increased retention to increased performance or ROI?
Yes, great question. So I want you to think about two things. I talk about the increase in retention, but I also want you to drill in preventing erosion. So it's the same coin, two sides. One side, preventing erosion. Because if you go, well, I went from a 76 to a 91, it's okay. No, you prevented down to a 20 or 30, and now you got an 86. That's some powerful goat juice, man. So I want you to think about preventing the erosion and boosting the retention. So, but back to your comment though, Bob, when we think about in fact, say your question one more time, because I want to make sure everybody gets it, because I talk too much.
Well, I'm all on board with increasing retention, but I'm saying, how can is there a way I can demonstrate to business people that increased retention results in increased performance and ROI?
Yes, sir. And so now jump to get your question without putting something else in, which is what I always do as an instructor. But the increase in performance, yes, there's my study of studies and the research I did I'm going to December. I'm at the International Training and Simulation Conference down in Orlando. Whether it was for doctors, it looked at doctors, it looked at golf, it looked at several performance things, and the output, the proper output task performance increased. So you should be able to tie positive ROI, positive organizational benefits to increased retention. So I would actually change the question as well, Bob. Are you teaching them the right stuff? If I'm teaching you how to operate equipment, an example, technicians had to operate a boiler system. We all know boiler systems, or I'm betting a lot of us do. Operate a boiler system. Starting that boiler up and turning it off, you're supposed to do certain procedures so you don't mess up the equipment. They were cutting corners so they could get it online quick and take it off quick. So the system was only lasting about 3 years when it's supposed to last 20. So the organization was spending millions of dollars on early system replacement. So by making sure they were doing the right procedures, that extra cost went away. Huge savings. So I think if you get back to looking at really, the underlying reason, the ROI reason for why you're doing training in the first place, that's going to roll right into reduced erosion and increased retention, which should equate to the performance and the development of the new habits. Did I answer your question, Bob?
Yeah, thank you.
And there's good studies on that as well.
You have another question from Pappy.
Yep. So Pappy, looking at ecological dynamics, constraints, and affordedness. This is a large buy-in right now in LE, DT, and BJJ training. Help us out. Help everybody out with. I think I know what you mean by DT, defensive tactics. But put what those acronyms mean for everybody in the room, if you don't mind, Pappy.
Or he can unmute if he'd like.
Or you can key a mic, whatever you prefer. Yep, defensive tactic.
Yeah, sorry about that. So I won't be rude. I'll go ahead and do the video. Well, the video's not coming up.
That's all right, Pappy. How you doing, man? So what's the BJJ?
It is, I can see you.
Oh, okay. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So we have a lot of followers of Rob Gray, law enforcement training and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu training and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for law enforcement. And I'll go extreme, which is state-based learning, ecological dynamics, reality-based training, to which I push back a little bit on the psychomotor skills, which is my expression is, well, then don't teach them anything, just throw them on the mat and tell them to figure it out themselves.
Right. All right.
Which is not what it is, but I'm at a point where I hear a lot of these law enforcement trainers and I'm not being critical of any one person because I'm just, maybe they know more than me, but no one yet has said, when they say, well, we're teaching with an ecological dynamics approach, constraint-led approach. And I say, show me what that looks like. Show me how you're teaching somebody, demonstrate that. No one
Sure.
yet has done that. So that's why I'm a
So-
little bit skeptical of that learning, while I don't reject it, but I'm going too far off.
That's fair. So let me help. Let's zero this in for both you and everybody else. So we're looking at defense. I was an unarmed defensive tactics instructor for years. Now frankly, I'm not going to teach you how to do a rear chokehold escape over the camera here. But I want you to think about every psychomotor skill or physical skill for non-ISDs. Has a well, I can't for you, Amy. I will, but it has a cognitive element. Typically has a cognitive element, may have an effective domain element. With those are very easy to reinforce. But what we find though is spaced repetition and reinforcement of psychomotor skills still benefits from this methodology. Now, am I going to push that defensive tactics training via your cell phone or whatever? I can use short video clips that you mirror. That's not going to be the same as working with an instructor, and especially for dangerous things like chokeholds, takedowns, some things that can do damage if they're done incorrectly or kill somebody. For those, you typically want the live instructor. The methodology, though, of reinforcement and repetition does work. Having been a psychomotor skills instructor, to actually have people practice under control and then move forward to free play situations, I can still use this methodology that will still benefit teaching those skills. Although my preferred practice, Pappy, to maintain my own skills was on the young man who would always show up to date my daughter. I always found that the pressure point training and chokehold escapes always resulted in a positive outcome for me. But probably you might want to rethink that. All right.
Okay, obviously this is a great engagement and great. The topic was fascinating to me. If there are additional questions you want to handle online, such as Pappy's question, feel free to contact Rich at any time. I do want to give acknowledgement to my cohorts with the co-learning and Jessica Morgan, who is behind. We call her Oz. She's behind the green curtain, and she runs everything. Without that, we'd have nothing. And my co-moderator for these things, Ms. LaRonda Julia. So I want to thank them and the staff for making all this support possible. And given that, I think that this will, I think within 30 days will be available for the recording will be posted, and you'll be notified if you want to pass it along or have others look at it. But until then, I want to thank Rich for being so exuberant and knowledgeable. We got very deep domain experience, and he's approachable. So he's a very practical guy. Given that, we will go ahead and depart, and thank you for supporting co-learning, and we hope to see you on future webinars. Take care.
I'll look forward to hearing from any of you who have any follow-on questions or anything I can help you with. Take care, and since I was in the Coast Guard, have a safe boating day.
Okay. Take care, everybody.